Thank you for having you on the conference. We are very happy to be in a conversation with you. I have a few questions. So MAPS has turned
Sure.
35.
Yeah.
So what has been the decisive moment when you thought, oh, this is going to happen. This is all going to turn out the way it is heading now? What was the turning point?
Well, okay. So the way it's going now is different than it's all going to succeed. So I thought you were heading that way to say, when did I know it's all going to succeed? And I'm not there yet
Yeah.
because the last stages sometimes are the hardest. And you encounter new problems or new issues or people that weren't that much paying attention. Now it looks like it's going to work. But where did it turn around where I thought it would reach this point? I would say that the most important moment was negotiating with the FDA at the end of phase 2 meeting. This was November 29th, 2016. So it was 30 years after MAPS had started. We'd gathered all sorts of phase 2 data for MDMA for PTSD, phase 1 dose response safety study, animal toxicity data, and we presented it to the FDA, and they said, it's enough for you to go to phase 3. And then that was almost the moment where I knew it was going to turn out. But then the very next thing we did was an 8-month negotiation in what's called the special protocol assessment process, which is optional. Most pharmaceutical companies don't do it because it delays things a lot. They're worried about their patent life and things like that. But for us, because of the methodological challenges of how do you do a double-blind study with psychedelics, and because of the controversy, I felt that we had to go through this negotiation, and it took us 8 months. And then at the end of it, we got what's called an agreement letter. And that meant that the FDA was legally bound to approve the drug if the design that we agreed on gets statistically significant evidence of efficacy and no new safety problems come. So that was the moment. And then just a couple of weeks after that, FDA declared MDMA a breakthrough therapy for post-traumatic stress disorder. So that's what got a lot of more attention. And that was really good. That was they're willing to sort of stand behind it publicly. But it was really the agreement letter and the special protocol assessment process that made me think that we would reach this point.
Yeah, so that was a pivotal moment for heading where you now are. The field
Yeah.
has changed a lot. We're talking about implementation on Insight 2021. So, what do you think are the biggest issues that everybody in the field is right now facing? What are the most important problems to solve?
Well, the first one is going to be insurance coverage. How do we get national health insurance and private insurance companies to cover it?
Mhm.
We can do a lot with self-pay, but there's many, probably most of the people that have trauma, have PTSD, that could need the therapy, can't afford to pay for it unless it's covered by insurance. So I think that's one thing. The other big thing that everybody's really wrestling with is, what do we do about training therapists? We're going to really need to scale up. So in the United States, in the first 6 years post-approval, we're talking in the range of 25 to 30,000 therapists that we need to train. And that's not even going to be able to deal with all the PTSD patients. So I think training therapists and how we do that, and what is the training, and then I'd say the third major challenge. I don't know that everybody is thinking about this yet, but it's going to be group therapy. What do we learn about group therapy? Is it as good as individual therapy? Is it better? Is it not as good, but it's still a lot less of the cost? And so we're going to start experimenting with group therapy early in the year, early 2022. I'll just say one last thing, which is, and this is where I think most people in the field are making a mistake, most people in the for-profit field. I think what do we do about drug policy reform and legalization? And so my view is that it's good for the business model, and it's good for human rights, and it's good for public policy, and it's good morally, that we have to be in favor of people having access to these substances on their own, without going through doctors, without going through religion, in some sort of a legalization. I call it licensed legalization, with pure drugs and honest drug education and harm reduction methods and treatment on demand. I think that's many people in the for-profit field feel that that's competition and that will be bad for the business model, but I think that they're wrong. I think it'll destigmatize it and build even more interest in people going to trained professionals covered by insurance.
So that's a
those
very
are the main
interesting
issues
point,
I
and
see.
everybody is looking at Oregon and how the model there works and how that compares to drug decriminalization models that are tested in Europe and elsewhere. So we'll talk about that on Insight, and that's going to be very, very interesting. Last question. So if you take a look at the field in 10 years, what do you think will we see? Where will we be in 10 years?
Yeah. Okay. So 10 years, let's say 2031. We will have, at that point, I think we'll have somewhere like 5,000 or 6,000 psychedelic clinics just in the United States. I think we will have legalized medical use of MDMA, of psilocybin. There'll be potentially 5-MeO-DMT. There may be other substances. There's going to be a lot of companies now that are trying to improve on, in their view, which means make patentable new molecules that will compete with the existing ones. Whether they'll be better or not remains to be seen. But I think that we will have spread throughout the culture and throughout Europe and Australia, Brazil, South America. We will have another thousands and thousands of clinics. There'll be cross-trained therapists for ketamine, for psilocybin, for MDMA. So it won't be like, here's a psilocybin clinic, here's an MDMA clinic. And we will be changing the cultural attitude through the stories of the people that are getting healed. So much so that I think in 2035, at least in the United States, that's my target date for when we'll have licensed legalization as well as medicalization. And I think we will have a much deeper understanding of how to get to the root of people's problems and not just address symptoms. We'll have some more advances in neuroscience. I'm still very dubious about whether the advances in neuroscience will actually help the therapeutic outcomes be better. You know, that we talk about translational neuroscience. What is it? You know, yes, we can understand more and more how it works, but will that help the therapist do their job better? But I think we'll be in a tremendous place 10 years from now.
So last question, because you brought up a topic. You're naming Western countries, philosophically, historically Western countries.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen with all those other regions in the world? Do you see any pathway forward in China, in Asia, in India, in Africa?
Yeah. Well, we're already training therapists in South Africa, in Rwanda, and Somaliland. There would need to be different models there. I mean, this sort of is kind of a sobering thought, but we're talking about how do you do psychedelic assisted therapy in countries where there are hardly any psychiatrists and hardly any psychotherapists. You know, we need to find new models of healing, group therapy, peer support, but there will be a lot of interest all over the world. And we're being approached by people in Armenia and Bosnia. We'd love to have MDMA therapy in refugee camps and in migrant camps. The other thing I didn't mention is that once we succeed, if we do succeed and the FDA makes MDMA into a medicine, we are required to do studies in adolescents with PTSD, 12 to 17-year-olds. And if that works, we're required to do 7 to 11-year-olds. So I think that we will be able to use this in adults, but in a lot of the countries that you're talking about, third world countries or people where there's a lot of displacement, climate refugees, there's going to be war refugees and economic refugees, all of that. I think that we will be able to do that. In China, things are delicate. We do have a donor that is from China, lives in America, wants us to bring MDMA to China. We've trained, partially trained 12 Chinese psychiatrists and therapists. That came along with simultaneous translators. And now our donor thinks that it's probably better to wait until after FDA approves to try to make more progress in China. So I think China's on hold. Russia is vastly repressive and is even blocking ketamine research for alcoholism or substance abuse. And Japan is going to need additional studies. But if we can get FDA and EMA approval, or even just FDA or EMA approval, most countries of the world will grant reciprocity. And so the main challenge is going to be training local therapists, or if they're not therapists, some other model of healers. But our goal is mass mental health. And when we say mass mental health, we don't just mean Western cultures.
Yeah.
The other thing by extension, just to mention it, is that when you work with people with PTSD, it impacts their families too. And so this is another sort of coming around answer to where are we going to be in 10 years from now. These clinics are going to start with the patients, but they're going to expand pretty rapidly to the families. So for a program that we've already done, the treatment development, the cognitive behavioral conjoint therapy, conjoint meaning couples, where one has PTSD and it affects the relationship, and we bring both into the therapy and both get MDMA. So I think we will work with traumatized. Also, we have this Israeli-Palestinian project where Israelis and Palestinians are using ayahuasca and MDMA together. Now, it's just small groups. It's the peace advocates on both sides, the more ones willing for coexistence. But I think we'll try to do more of that kind of cultural reconciliation as well.
So thank you, Rick, for these insights into what's happening and views on what might happen. And on Insight, we'll be talking a lot about the relationship of these experiences with open society. So, and these issues are very, very interesting. So meeting you soon in Berlin and having all these great discussions, I'm really looking forward.